the Johor Archives records, which is so-called what became the Surat Sungai, and the sort of, or as I called them, they were called I forget the word now. But I made a Surat Keterangan. Yeah, that's it. Keterangan. They were letters of, I suppose, clarification or something, if you want to use that. But these were the documents that gave each Kangchu the power to control his little river valley, and so he could, introduce. He could bring in his own labor force, put them to work. In Rio, probably sometime around 1750. Yeah.
So this system actually worked out in Rio.
Yeah.
It got carried on to Singapore prior to arrival of Raffles.
Yeah, there were already a number of Chinese pepper and gambir planters settled here in Singapore. I mean, that's quite there's that that's in the British records that those guys were here. There's in fact even some of the names were recorded as well, and they would have been brought here by the Temenggung. Abdul Rahman, who was already here, his establishment was either here in Telok Blangah or there on the Singapore River. After 1824, when John Crawford wanted them out of, and Raffles wanted the Malays to get away from the Singapore River because that's where he wanted to have the British settlement. But if there was the case of the Amak of I think it was what his name was, some Malay, I think, or Buddhist went amok, and Raffles was very sort of severe with this whole thing, and he hung the body up on a scaffold and dragged it around the town and stuff like that, and the Malays found it, of course, very confronting. Then they after he was buried, then they established a kramat where his body was. So just to show some respect for this guy, and so. But anyhow, I mean the British leaders, Raffles and Farquhar, and then later on Crawford, when he came, he was followed up as the resident from 1824 to 1828. He's really the guy that organized the colony, if you like, and got Abdul Rahman to sign away the whole island, because initially Raffles didn't really.
Abdul Rahman was with Hussein when they signed off the island, right?
Yeah, right.
But
well,
actually Hussein that
Abdul Rahman was here before.
Karimun.
Yeah,
they kidnapped him.
Yeah, and then they grabbed him, brought him back here, and said, "Okay, sign the thing." And so he did, and then now you can be Sultan, because he was recognized as the Sultan of Johor and Singapore.
Do you feel Abdul Rahman was a bit reluctant to sign off Singapore, or was he just?
Yeah, he was, but he didn't have much choice. I mean, once the British were here in force, they had, warships out in the harbor and stuff like that. And, on the ground here, he could control things. But, I think he felt initially, and I tried to explain in the book, that he would have been able to collect taxes from China and collect taxes from the Malay traders. And that's what the British would say was piracy, if they sort of had a boat out in the harbor meeting some Malay trader coming from Sumatra and saying, okay, sell us your stuff, or pay your tax, or whatever they called it. They had been growing gambir for a while. You see, okay, and Malays had been growing it, and then for some reason we don't know exactly when, Chinese started to buy it and use it in China. Cultivate the pepper. And then you could use the dead leaves from the gambir to fertilize the pepper plants. It was a nice little cycle that they put it together. So that was a good system. And China, it worked. It was because the Bugis leaders, especially Raja Haji and his people, they worked together with the Chinese who were settled there in Tanjung Pinang, and then they brought in Chinese labor. With cooperating with the Chinese merchants who were there, and sent them up into the hills, and you can see the names of these old settlements too contain like Chukang or Chikang, or there were a couple of places where there were, you could see that there were places in Riau that were called some kind of gang. So those places were there early in the 18th century.
So all this has been established, been running a good system before the British.
Right. Yeah.
So
In
what-
1784, then the Bugis had become so prosperous that they were thumbing their nose at the Dutch, and then the Dutch came in and said, they wanted to push the Bugis out of Riau, and so then they got into the war with Raja Haji, and Raja Haji attacked Malacca, and actually sort of almost conquered Malacca, but he died in that thing, and then the Dutch. Even at that point, Dutch were right up against their backs were to the wall, the Dutch East India Company, because it was almost broke. So they had to actually ask the Dutch government to send the Dutch warship from Holland to come, and then sort of this Admiral van Braam came, and then he just destroyed Riau. He just smashed Penyengat and Tanjung Pinang and whatever. In 1784, yeah, and so then the Bugis ran away. And they had to flee, to disperse in the islands, and they went up to the
1784.
Yeah, and they headed off up to a lot of them went up the East Coast someplace, or to what?
Natuna.
The Natunas, yes, they were that far, So they a lot of them went that direction.
Some of them do come to Singapore.
What?
Some of them do come to Singapore.
Some of them may have,
So I reckon.
Well, see, what it was is that's when they go, oh, everybody's a pirate now. So I mean, the ones that so the whole the system and the discipline within the system that was there before is gone now. But the thing of it is, from a short period, for 2 years, the Malays stayed in Riau and tried to work with the Dutch. But then they got into a conflict with the Dutch. And then they tried to drive the Dutch out again, and then the Dutch came back and drove them out, and so they ran away. And all of them, they went up the East Coast, to Pahang and to Terengganu and stuff like that, and hit up there, except for the Temenggung, and they went to the Karimons, and particularly with this guy, Uncle Muda, who was, I think an important person in the Temengung's family. He was like a cousin of Temenggung Abdul Rahman, or something like that. And then at some point, he's supposed to have said, okay, I don't want to have anything to do with this. If you want to go to Singapore, go ahead, because I don't want to have anything to do. So Abdul Rahman comes to Singapore ultimately sometime around, the sort of between 1810, 1819, in that period, the beginning of the 19th century. And so he's settled up there by the Singapore River, doing his little thing, and maybe bringing in a few Chinese, because this is a way that the Buddhists have shown everybody how to make money. You bring in the Chinese, they grow some gambir, you can sell that, that's a trading good, so it's an income. And so, we can do this. So I'm sure it's the Temengung's leadership that brings those people into Singapore in the first place. But then the British come in 1819, and he says, okay, you can have a factory in this particular area. Not very big. It's just a cannon shot. That's all they got. Cannon shot from the beach inland. Okay, that's as far as the British had. Yeah, from this river to that river, something, I don't know exact terms. I'd have to look at the treaty again, but that was the deal. And so, and it stayed that way until 1824. Okay, and all this time, the settlement is growing, and tensions are increasing between the Temenggong and his people, and maybe the Bugis and somebody else, the Chinese, the British, and if you read like the Hikayat Abdullah, he says, oh, the Temenggong's people were like, tigers among the lambs, and every day you would hear, about people getting killed and beaten up or something like that, And you have to understand, who he was. He was a city Malay from Malacca. He wasn't used to these kind of rough guys who were tough maritime Malays. Ibrahim also, when they then discovered Gada Percha in the jungles of Johor, that's when he begins to say, okay, there's stuff that's valuable in Johor, and I'm the boss of Johor, so I'm going to take it for myself. And so, again, he would send his people into the jungle to get Gada Percha, but also, it's not rubber, it's a special kind of rubber, actually. It's not
Percha.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a different kind. It's actually, what happened, the British found these guys going around Singapore. They were coachmen, guys who drove horses for
Yes.
coaches, you know, with stuff like that. And they had whips, and the whips were made out of this geta, and it was a kind of rubber, but it was not like ordinary rubber because you just got it from the tree and you put it into a shape, and it didn't decay. It held its form. You could warm it up and shape it, and it would, when it cooled, it would stay in that form. And was a special. It had these special qualities, and not only that, but it was very impervious to water. And so the British, you know, at that point they were laying the underground telegraph cables from across the ocean, and they found that they could use this stuff to coat the cables to keep out the seawater. And so, you know, suddenly it became a valuable item of trade. And Temenggong was, you know, first in, best dressed with the thing. And so he was able to sort of capture the market and began sort of controlling the movement of it into Singapore.
This was in which year?
About 1834, 1835. About the same time he was suppressing piracy.